Hey guys, Bike here, and I'm back again with another Last Epoch build guide video. This one is for the Cleave Racing Strike Cycle 1.1. This one's a personal favorite of mine. I've done a build guide for Cleave Racing Strike in beta. I also did it for Cycle 1.0, and now here we are again in Cycle 1.1. This build is a personal favorite. I love to just roll around, cleave through enemies in the monos, move pretty quickly, do that 1-2 punch, boom, get going. So I'm going to try and be quick with the video, and if all you're here for are just, a planner or, just a specific part in the video, there are timestamps in the description. So if that's what you're here for, thank you very much for being here. If you could leave a like, possibly subscribe if you like what I do, I would appreciate it. But let's go ahead and get into the video and go over some gameplay and everything else. Let's go. All right, here we are in game. We got gameplay playing right now. This was taken at corruption 490. Not the highest I've pushed, but I've been playing this build for about a week. I do play in Circle of Fortune, so I have to, go out there, find the gear, and get the drops, get the slams. One thing about this cycle that I've been having an issue with is I've been timing out in the Temporal Sanctum often, so I'm burning through a lot of keys and not getting anything for it in return. So I don't feel like I've progressed as fast, and I think that might be just a personal thing because a lot of other people are like, oh, Temporal Sanctum's working fine. So I just figured I'd put that out there. But we have pushed this to 490 corruption. It moves quickly through monoliths, just being able to cleave and then bonk, cleave and then bonk, move around. It's a blast. I love this build. It's great. So here we are. We got Rye, our classic favorite. We were able to smack him pretty quickly and take him down, but that comes down to player experience. The Black Sun timeline is one of my favorite timelines, and I've killed Rye hundreds. Well, maybe that's an exaggeration, but I've killed Rye a lot. So I'm familiar with all of his move sets and where to go and all that, but the next one we got is the new Harbingers. I believe this is the Harbinger of Defilement. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry. His move patterns are a little bit different, and he's not super melee friendly, so it takes me a while to take this guy down, but we do take him down. He likes to spawn a lot of area of effect with all of Rye's moves, and then like the little circle pattern that summons the stuff, it moves in a different pattern than what Rye does. So I'm starting to learn that one, but I think this is all going to come down to player experience and learning the fight. Eventually, I think we'll be able to cleave through this new Harbinger pretty quick. I have taken this build up against Aberoth. We have not been able to take down Aberoth with this build. That's also going to come down to player experience, but unfortunately, this is a great running through monoliths build. I don't think it is a great boss killer build. So even if I get this fully spec'd out, I don't know if this is going to be Aberoth viable. I just want to say that right now. I don't think it's going to be Aberoth viable. But with all that being said, let's go ahead and look at the gear. All right, so we got a couple new pieces from my previous builds. We, of course, are leaning on Omnis again. This is a great amulet to have. This one, we took it, we popped it into the Nemesis. We got poison resistance. That's great. +1 to all skills. If you can manage a bone amulet, would work just fine in this slot, and then you could put on something like critical strike multiplier or anything else you like. But Omnis is a great thing to lean on. This is the new addition to the build. Decayed Skull got changed. They've been updating it slowly. In beta, this thing was kind of a joke, but now it's actually viable. You get the amount of armor you get on Decayed Skull with the multiplicative modifiers and the way it works with the rest of the build is roughly on par with something like a Terror Crown. So I do think this has a place in the build, and the biggest thing that it got in cycle 1.1 is now a percentage of our armor mitigation also applies to damage over time. So before it was just gloves with the experimental modifier, then they added the eternal gauntlets, they added champion regalia. So if you can get yourself a good Decayed Skull, a good Champion Regalia, and a good Eternal Gauntlets, I don't have any good Eternal Gauntlets, you can really be stacked against damage over time. So yeah, if you're lucky like me and you get a 3 LP, health, vitality, go for that. I would prioritize health, percentage health, and then vitality due to the new scaling, and then flat health. Champion Regalia here, I would have preferred either a T7 Vitality or a T7% health, but this is what I got. Like I said, I'm Circle of Fortune. I've been playing this build for about a week. This is the best I can come up with. You could also use an Apocalypse plate in this place, but Champion Regalia, the flat 700 armor, the armor mitigation also applies against dots. This is a great pickup. Apathy's Maw, I've got a ton of these Apathy's Maws. Now, in the build that I put out for Cycle 1.0, I had a T7 critical melee critical strike multiplier. This is more reminiscent of the build I put out in beta, where we just had a fat critical strike multiplier here. Either are fine. I do think it's probably going to be a little bit easier to get either an Apathy's Maw with nothing on it, and you're just going off the sheer just flat damage you get, or getting some sort of like melee void or percent void. I don't know if I use it with percent void, but you know, critical strike multiplier. But melee critical strike multiplier is absolutely good in this spot too. But if that's a build you're more interested in, I would check out the build I put out in Cycle 1.0. It is pretty much similar to this one. I'll have a link to that build guide in the description down below if you're interested in that. But critical strike multiplier on this build is a good pickup for sure. That's why I recommend if you can get away from using an Omnis, using some sort of amulet here with like a T7 critical strike multiplier would be great. All right, so moving down to the reins, I do think the coral reins are best in slot due to the vitality that they can get, but not everybody's going to be able to get them. This one we go for critical strike chance. You might be wondering, well, if you're making a racing strike your main auto crit, like why do you have any critical strike chance on the gear? The main reason why is Void Cleave can still do a bunch of damage. It's going to be very infrequent since we're not using melee crit strike chance on the weapon. You could also just go for strength. You can do without the critical strike chance, and you can go straight up for strength. Boost your armor, boost your damage. I've played a couple different builds this cycle so far, and this ring has been pretty much locked in since like day 3. I've had this ring for a while. We got the critical strike avoidance, melee damage, critical strike chance, health. This one, I do think if you're not going the critical strike avoidance route, I should also point out Leonines would be best in slot. But if you are going critical strike avoidance, Decayed Skull all the way. All right, let's move on over here. Shattered Chains. This is best in slot. It goes hand in hand with Apathy's Maw. Apathy's Maw can apply Doom. Doom is an awesome ailment to have on enemies. This allows you to do even more damage per stack of Doom. Best in slot here would be a Cleanse. The best I got is a T5 hybrid health. Eventually, if I keep playing this build more this cycle, I'd like to see a Cleanse in there somewhere. This ring, you can use any ring you want. I got critical strike chance, void damage, health, cold resistance because I needed it. This ring, you can literally put anything you want. You can even try the new crab ring. Crab rings are nice. I personally like the dodge, so throw in whatever you want. You can even make a copy of something like this if you want to put it in there. Your rings are up to you. All right, so best in slot would be the Eternal Gauntlets, but I don't have a good one. So right now I'm using this Crusader Gauntlets of Life. Best in slot would probably, well, we already stated best in slot, but affixes I would want to go for either strength or critical strike chance. Some sort of maybe melee attack speed. You're not going to need leech. We got plenty of leech on the build, so melee attack speed can make it feel a little bit snappier. Definitely go for a T7 hybrid health if you can swing it, and then armor shred would go really nice in this build. This build is severely lacking armor shred, but we still do a lot of big bonks. Dark Stride, you have two options here. Dark Stride I do think is best in slot. I personally think we already have enough movement speed as is, but if you wanted, you can put like a T7 movement speed here. The Cycle 1.0 build guide I put out there at a T7 movement speed. Me personally, I would like to see a T7 vitality, since we already get plenty of movement speed from just the sheer amount of flat melee void damage that's on apathies. And there's multiple different ways to get movement speed now. You know, with the new reins in the game, you can throw on a crab rein. You give up your dodge roll, but you gain swiftness, and swiftness is like an easy 20% movement speed. So there's a little bit more options here. You could obviously opt to not take Dark Stride, but just having that extra charge to Void Cleave can't be ignored. And then Anchor of Oblivion. In my two previous build guides that I've released on this, I've had a +3 to Void Cleave here. I still think that would be the way to go, but like I said, this is probably the most budget version of Void Cleave Erasing Strike I've put out yet, and I'd even slam this. I got a 0 LP Anchor of Oblivion, slapped it into the Nemesis, and it spit out this T4 health. I took it. You can live without the +3 to Void Cleave, but +3 to Void Cleave can give you some more options just to put some more points around if you need it. Okay, let's move on to the idols. So I've opted for two Grand Solar idols that will give me Abyssal Decay and Armor, Abyssal Decay and Armor. Right here we have Vitality and Increase Armor. So right now we're rocking 6,590 armor, 70% damage reduction. And then right here we took increased echo damage when a skill echoes, and plus a chance to apply Time Rot. All good stats to have. We have cold resistance, physical resistance, cold resistance, necrotic resistance, necrotic resistance. Your idols, you can literally put whatever you want here. I was able to just squeeze out some extra armor, but if you're not using Omnis and you need this for resistances, have at it. I should also mention, best in slot here might be a Titan Heart, but the Champion Regalia is a hard one to ignore. Let's move on to the blessings. So I like to go here, open this up. You got a couple options. I personally like Shred, Void Resistance, but you can pick up Critical Strike Multiplier here in the Black Sun. Right now I'm using Experience just because I'm not level 100 yet, but anything you want from this timeline, gold, unique drop rate, whatever. Here, whatever you're looking for here, these help with drop rates. Ending the Storm, if you got your lightning resistance taken care of and you're not using a Titan Heart, you can use health regen. Or you can go for something like mana if you feel like you're constantly running out of mana. You got a couple options here, but I think lightning resistance is a great way just to deal with that portion of your resistances. So Reign of Dragons, since we are going full critical strike avoidance, that's what we have to take to be able to hit full critical strike avoidance. If you are using a Leonines or Citadel boots, something, and you got your critical strike damage reduction taken care of, then your best in slot here would be all res. Spirits of Fire, flat armor. These, I believe, goes all the way up to 320. Great pickup. If you're not using an Anchor of Oblivion that gives you 40% endurance, I would definitely go for an endurance roll if you need it. But otherwise, flat armor all the way. Age of Winter, I go for percentage armor. I think this is Best in slot here for this particular build. It's best in slot for a lot of builds. Percentage armor. Last ruin, skill shard drop rate, whatever shard drop rate you're looking for, pick it up here, move on. I don't like fighting Elder Gaspar, but there's more of a reason to fight it now, you know. Playing Circle of Fortune, we get that increased drop rate. Elder Gaspar has a higher chance to drop Ravenous Void, so I might actually be farming Elder Gaspar along with the new Harbingers that are here. There's more of a reason to go back other than I hate Elder Gaspar. Okay, let's move on to the skills. So we're using Omnis. It adds a +1 to all skills, but as you can notice, we're not using any class affixes. Let's go. Let's start with a Racing Strike. So a Racing Strike is the main form of damage right now. Like I said, if you have melee critical strike chance and you're able to get consistent crits, Void Cleave can do a butt ton of damage. But for right now, we don't have it, so a Racing Strike is our big bonk. So what I like to go for is just pick up stuff like Obliteration, since we know it's already an auto crit, trying to increase that flat damage. So right here, this gives us a flat 60-60 spell void, melee void damage. Here helps with our cooldown reduction, as well as another multiplicative melee damage versus damaged enemies. If you can swing it, you can pick up even more multiplicative damage, like if you have a +3, +4 on your chest plate, or if you have something else, you can pick it up here. But I would go for this, since we're constantly hitting with Vengeance and Void Cleave most of the time. We're not hitting full health enemies, so Merciful, I think, is a good pickup here. Erasure of the Living, this thing is huge. The kill threshold's amazing. 50% multiplicative modifier. Love it. Took 3 in Dust to win. This gives us a greater area for the Erasing Strike. Put 3 points in Mark of the End, gives us more Void Shred chance. And then 1 point in Twin Cataclysms. So go back real quick on what I said here. We do have a decent amount of Void Shred chance, but I do feel like having this here, we can build up the Void Shred stacks very quickly by having this, and boom, bringing the bonks. That's why I like it, but like I said, if you feel like your Void Shred chance is good, go for Critical Strike Multiplier. All right, that covers a Racing Strike. Let's move on to Void Cleave. Void Cleave is kind of in a weird spot. You have multiple different ways to set it up. What you could do is you can reduce this by 1 and reduce this by 2. So you have 3 extra points, and you can put them wherever you want. Me personally, I like just, if we do get a crit with Void Cleave, having that extra oomph to go behind it. So we put 3 points here in Abyssal Walker, 1 point in Gravity's Edge. That turns this into a movement skill. That's how we can move around pretty quickly. 3 points in Dark Pathway, get that cooldown, recovery speed, make sure our Void Cleave comes back faster. 2 points in Flaying Strikes. When we hit with Void Cleave, an instant 2 stacks of Void Shred resistance goes onto the enemy. We add 2 stacks, and we can add more with our Vengeance because of the blessing. Abyssal Echoes is cast when we cast Void Cleave. This is a great way to set up the big bonks for a Racing Strike. 1 point in Precognition, 3 points in Riftmaker, 4 points in Champion of the Void, 1 point in Obliterator. This is what turns a Racing Strike into an automatic crit. I really love Void Cleave. So if you do go the Critical Strike route, Void Cleave will be one of your biggest bonks. But this is an easier way to get good crits and big bonks with this setup. Moving to Volatile Reversal. So this is virtually the same for what I normally do, except there's one change. I don't know if this got changed, but I think I've been sleeping on food for worms. But Volatile Reversal's Void Rift chance have a chance to inflict Time Rot. If you go back to the idols, we have a 20% chance to inflict Time Rot. We can pick up Time Rot in the passive tree if we so desire. I don't think we need to, but we could pick it up here to have even more Time Rot chance. We'll cover that when we get to the passives. But Food for Worms, what this does is for the 2 seconds, hold up. After casting Volatile Reversal, you gain a buff that causes you to deal more void damage per stack of Time Rot on the target. The duration of this buff is equal to the length of time you travel back. In this case, 2 seconds. So for 2 seconds, Volatile Riff, Void Cleave, Bonk, and assuming you've been hitting with Vengeance and you're building up those stacks, you're going to get big bonk damage. Bonks for days from Food for Worms. So this is the main change. I used to take 3 points in catching up, but like I said, I don't know if it got changed or something, but I feel like I'm noticing it now, and I'm like, holy, that is nuts. So that's why we're taking Food for Worms and we're giving up catching up. Otherwise, it's still the same exact setup we've done before. Cooldown, recovery, attack speed, of course, Harbinger of Dust. Get that extra damage. Yeah. Vengeance, if you've seen any of my previous builds, pretty much the same thing. Most important note, bolster. You hit an enemy, and then for the next 2 seconds, you get 25% less damage taken. It's multiplicative, so this does interact pretty well with Titanheart. I've personally had such bad luck with Titanheart in Cycle 1 and Cycle 1.1 so far. I'm not even accounting for Titanheart. They're easy to find, but my slams, like I said, I've also been having issues with Temporal Sanctum. I haven't gotten anything good, but yeah, if you can get a Titanheart and you can go with this, bro, goes very well, plus the 50% increased damage, not increased damage, 50% increased armor you get after hitting an enemy for 2 seconds. Great way to stay alive. Essence of Revenge, Riposte, which is something you hit an enemy. When you hit an enemy, you prepare a riposte. And then if you get hit while you're preparing a riposte during those 2 seconds, you not only get the damage reduction, but you also get you also take further damage reduction because you riposte the attack. So for 2 seconds you hit, you get 2 charges of riposte. So for 3 hits in those 2 seconds, you're going to take 18% less damage as well as 25%. Multiplicative with each other. Like I say, you mix in Titanheart, bro, you're talking about great damage reduction with Vengeance. And so when we riposte, we gain Void Essence. Void Essence is good. It gives us more void damage, increased melee damage, and 10% reduced stun duration. I like it a lot. 5 points in Rapid Strikes is just so we can hit a little bit faster, apply those ailments, especially if we have like some armor shred. It goes great. 1 point in Double Riposte. That way we can get the damage reduction. 5 points in Dark Duelist. So when we hit an enemy and we're preparing to riposte, we get a 20% global more damage. This is huge. So in those 2 seconds, assuming you haven't been hit 3 times, you get 20% more damage. This is multiplicative with other modifiers. Bonks. And then 1 more point in Zealot's Technique, so we can take, so we have another chance to riposte. Let's move on to Abyssal Echoes. So this one's a little bit different. I'm only putting 2 points in Crippling Waves because that's all we need to get to Void Supremacy. I used to go for all 3 stacks just for that extra slow, but honestly, this does extra damage to slowed enemies. It doesn't say how slowed they have to be. They just have to be slowed. So the idea here with Abyssal Echoes, we proc it with Void Cleave. Abyssal Echoes goes out. We increase the size and how far it can go. Enemies are slowed after casting Abyssal Echoes, which this counts when we use it through Void Cleave. Our next Void Cleave and Erasing Strike. It's not either or, and will deal more damage multiplicative with other modifiers, 80%. Void Cleave, Erasing Strike, Abyssal Echoes is already going out. Bonk. Now here's the cool thing. This will go on cooldown, and since we have 2 charges of Void Cleave, if we quickly Void Cleave and Erasing Strike again, Void Cleave is now going to benefit from that next bonk. So a little extra, 1, 2. Or you can wait for Abyssal Echoes to come back, and then there you go. The one thing I don't like about it is the mana cost. Sometimes we run out of mana. We'll go over how we deal with mana in the other one in the passive tree. But yeah, I love Abyssal Echoes. 1 point in Vorpal Reverberation, 4 points in Embrace of Darkness. We do more damage against blinded enemies. We get an attack speed buff. While we have Nether Coating, and we do 20% more. Is this more? We do 20% increased damage against blinded enemies. If you go over here, take 1 point in Turbulence, 1 point in Myopia. Enemies are now blinded. There you go. You blind enemies. You get with Abyssal Echoes. You do 20% more damage to them, and you have a 20% attack speed. You can attack a little bit faster, apply some more stuff. Bonk, bonk. And these two, Corrupting Harness and Deep Expanse, just allow it to go out more. All right, let's go on to the passive tree. So I took 4 points in Juggernaut because that's all I needed just to hit the fire and void resistance. If you don't need fire and void resistance, you can only put 2 points here, put more points in Fearless. You can also mess around with some of this other stuff. I personally don't. So 4 points, 6 points. Gives us vitality, health regen. It's great. If you're using Titan Heart, this is less rewarding. You could go for the inverse, put more points in Juggernaut for that strength. 5 points in Armor Clad gives us more armor, and we take 10% less damage from nearby enemies. I wish Sentinel had more options in this regard, but I guess the devs are going, well, you can stack all the armor, you can use shields, you can use all that. You get the least amount of damage reduction out of all the class from your passive trees. 5 points in Valiant Charge. This is great because that 30% cooldown speed also applies to Void Cleave now that it's a movement skill. Great, plus 30 health. Time and Faith. This one got changed. Instead of you get back 10 mana, 10 flat health per hit, they changed it to you get back 10% missing health. It's a great way to stay alive because this only happens when you use Rive, Vengeance, Smite, or Multi-Strike, right? When you're actually hitting, when you're actually using it, you get it back. You don't have to actually hit anything. So you can stand in a corner and hit the air and you're gaining back health, you're gaining back mana. Fabulous node. Great. 5 points on Blade Master. We get 30% more attack speed with a sword or an axe, which is great because Void Cleave requires a two-handed axe or sword for this particular build. Yes, I'm aware that Aberoth's command exists. Okay, I dipped 5 points into Defiance because I needed the elemental resistance. If you don't need this, take it out. We're not using Healing Hands, but I mean, I guess that is an option later on down the line if you want to mess with the build some more. All right, Void Knight. I put 10 points here in Abyssal Endurance. If you don't need all that Void and Physical, you can take a couple points out, put it somewhere else if you like. 2 points in Temporal Corruption, 8 points in Void Blades. This gives us even more flat melee void damage. 6 points in World Eater. This is actually great. This is actually a 12% leech because you get 6% melee, 6% void. And since we're doing melee void, 12%. 1 point in Void Corruption. This gives us critical strike multiplier per point spent in Void. So all of these points, 77% critical strike multiplier. It's fabulous. 8 points in Doom Knight gives us strength and health. 1 point in Finality gives us melee void damage kill threshold. You could opt for putting a point here in Essence of the End and then 1 point in Void Well. That way you can regain some mana if you need it at a pinch. 10 points in Eternal Form. This one got changed. It's absolutely fabulous. Per point of vitality, we now gain even more health. Everybody took Eternal Form anyway. If you're playing Void Knight, this has even more value. 5 points in Echoing Strikes. 10 points in Time Legion. And 1 point in Avatar of Regret. Along with what we get from being a Void Knight. Gives us a 40% chance to echo. When we echo something, an echo of ours does the same skill good things happen. Time Legion gives us even more melee attack speed and a time rot chance, echo chance. Absolutely love it. And then 15 points in dread, 120% void damage, 15% movement speed. And that is the passive tree. Thank you so very much for being here. If you watched all the way to the end, really appreciate it. Looking forward to more content here in Cycle 1.1. If you like what I do here, consider dropping a like on the video or possibly subscribing. Thank you very much for watching the video. You guys take care.